Hi, everybody. Thank you all for coming. I'm Bruce Frazier. I'm the MC tonight, and am just thrilled to be able to be here again.
Can you speak in the mic, please?
Yes, I can. I'll start over. No, doesn't really matter. But 2 years ago, I had the distinct honor to be asked to introduce the exciting possibility of bringing this very special, spectacular mural to Omaha. And that evening was planned and sponsored by Jan Strauss, her daughters Ann Hosford and Susan Labens, and their husbands Don and Mike. And we would like to say thank you to you for doing that event, which kicked off this great experience. Best I can with my notes because I had my eyes dilated today and it's a little difficult to see. And if you all know, once you get one of those appointments, you don't change them. And as I'm leaving today, they said, would you like to make your appointment for next year? And I said, I'm supposed to know what I'm doing next year on a specific time, so I'll do the best I can. The other thing that I want to do is introduce a couple of other very special people. Joining us tonight are Mr. Kingman's two daughters, Mixie Kingman Eddy and Elizabeth Kingman. Would you like to stand? And not only that, but generational, we also have Quinn Kingman Eddy, grandson. We're really thrilled that you could be here tonight. This is just such an unusual and special moment for so many of us. We are thrilled also to have City Councilman Chris Jerem here today. Thanks for coming, Chris, and thanks for all your help. We have a number of people who really were instrumental in making sure that this whole process was able to come to fruition. The Kingman New York Times Steering Committee has been working on this project for several years, and that is Julie Cobb, Julie Riley, Maureen McCann-Waldron, Lynn Wallen-Ziegenbein, and Amy Trelone. Say hi to those people. Wave your hands. There are so many people who have really been involved in this project over the past couple of years, and it really would not be possible to list all the people who have worked so diligently in raising funds, in bringing awareness, in helping to find a location for this really spectacular piece. But here is somewhere, some of the people here, some of the people who have worked on this and helped are the staff of the Jocelyn Castle Trust. They've been working on this since 2014, and it was necessary for us to find an entity that could sponsor this, that was a not-for-profit, and so Jocelyn Castle Trust has been working actively on that. The designers and writers of the Durham Museum also have been working on it, as well as the Omaha Public Library staff, who have been actively involved with the placement of it and dealing with all the logistics of how this might happen. The people at the Ford Conservation Center, which is where the mural was actually deposited to be restored. And then all of you who have contributed and supported to this. We had more than 100 people who contributed over $65,000 in order to get this done. And it was done as a labor of love by all of the people involved. And it's an enormous achievement. I've said enough, and what we really want to do is get to the point where we can see this fabulous work of art. But I do want to introduce Maureen Waldron, who is going to say a few words about the mural. Maureen?
Thank you, Bruce. Let's imagine it's 1946, and we are walking through the lower level of the Jocelyn Art Museum. A huge piece of canvas 7 feet high and 21 feet long, is attached to the wall. Eugene Kingman is beginning to paint. He has a commission for the lobby of the New York Times. He must have had some sense of the power and importance of this commission. The mural that we are about to see was installed in New York in 1948 and hung there for the next 40 years. We will never be able to imagine the number of people who saw this mural. Important people coming to the paper for interviews, meetings with editorial boards, presidential candidates like John F. Kennedy, famous authors, diplomats, newsmakers, Broadway stars, and all those people who worked at the New York Times walked past it every day. The reporters, the staff, the executives, every one of them came through the doors of the lobby and saw this painting. Over the years, this painting has suffered from exposure, probably constant cigarette and cigar smoke, and it suffered from the passage of time itself. In the late 1980s, during a remodeling of the lobby, the mural was taken down and placed in storage. Then for more than 25 years, this painting above us was rolled up in storage, almost forgotten, except in the memory of some longtime New York staffers and in the hearts of Eugene Kingman's 2 daughters, Mixie and Elizabeth. Today, through your generosity, we are able to show the people of this city a restored view of Kingman's work right back here where it began. And so with deep gratitude to Eugene Kingman, together we can now have a first look at the New York Times mural the way it looked on the day he finished it. Bruce?
Thank you. Now for the moment we've all been waiting for. We'd like to ask the Strauss family and the Kingman family to please come forward, come over here and grab onto one of these strings. And we hope that at the moment that that happens, that this shroud is going to drop, that you will all get to see what we have been waiting so anxiously for. And if you haven't seen or heard this yet, there was a phenomenal article about this mural today in the New York Times. And so there's some great pictures, and there's also a photograph showing what the mural looked like in its original location. So without further ado, we can count down like New York, like the ball. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pull it down. In the script, I just wrote oohs and ahs ensue. When we look at this beautiful piece of art, we have to ask, how did this come about? I think to understand that, we need to understand who Eugene Kingman was. This son of New England was born in Rhode Island in 1909. Eugene Kingman was kind of a whiz kid. While he was an undergraduate at Yale, he received attention across the country when the National Park Service commissioned him to paint scenes of several of the parks. 7 of those paintings were chosen for an exhibition in Paris in 1931, and 2 of those France paintings still hang in the Department of the Interior's office in Washington, D.C. Kingman received his degree in geology from Yale in 1932 and continued his studies there, getting his Master of Fine Arts. At the same time, he was also on the faculty at the prestigious Rhode Island School of Design, where he was teaching mural painting and lithography. He won major commissions sponsored by the Treasury Department, creating 3 spectacular murals that are still hanging in post offices in Rhode Island, Maryland, and Wyoming. Kingman was making a name for himself as one of the regionalist American artists, along with his friend Thomas Hart Benton and with Grant Wood. With his combined background in geology and art,
he was invited to illustrate the 1937 issue of National Geographic magazine with 13 paintings of Crater Lake and Yosemite National Park. In 1939, he married Elizabeth Yelm, who was not only an anthropologist, but she was one of the first ever women park rangers that we had. And after their marriage, the Kingmans moved to Tulsa, where he became the first director of the Philbrook Museum of Art. He just turned 30. But the war broke out, and by 1942, he was in the Army and assigned to Washington, D.C., and the Office of Strategic Services. The OSS was the precursor to the CIA. His remarkable combination of background in geology, art, murals, and museum exhibits made him uniquely qualified to become, in the middle of World War II, the head of presentations for the map-making division of the OSS. It was in his service at the OSS where Kingman probably first met one of the most famous map makers this country has ever had, Richard Eads Harrison. In World War II, where maps became a lifeline of information to everyone in the country, Harrison was on the staff of Fortune magazine, as well as doing maps for Time, Life, and other magazines. He was also a geographic consultant for the OSS, the State Department, the U.S. Geological Survey, and the Air Force. What made Harrison so important was the way he drew maps. All of us in school, in the maps we have folded or not folded in our cars, even Google Maps, we still use a method of drawing maps that was developed by a Flemish cartographer in 1569. His name was Mercator. It offers views of the Earth that rely on direction. And it's direction instead of size, and it's something that's very helpful if you're navigating a ship. But in the 1930s, Harrison stopped using the Mercator projection, it was called, because he thought it had outlived its purpose. Instead, his maps show a view of the world as a pilot might have seen them from above. This perspective was so important that the military hired Harrison to make maps for soldiers in the field, to help train pilots, and to understand regions that had not yet been photographed from an airplane. And it helped Americans to really get a better perspective of geography and the relationship from where countries were and why the president might want to station troops in Iceland. That's why, after the war in 1946, Eugene Kingman and Richard Eads Harrison were the perfect people to do a mural of the world for the publisher of the New York Times. Arthur Hayes Sulzberger wanted a mural that was inspirational, a map without borders and something that showed the world as a whole. Kingman was a painter and an expert in murals. Harrison gave him the map to use. This mural was painted at the Joslin Art Museum because after the war, Kingman had been hired to become the second director. This mural is an incredibly accurate view of the world as it might have been seen from space, even though this was 11 years before the first satellite ever went into space, before we really did know what the Earth looked like. After 2 years of work in the basement at Joslin, Kingman flew to New York and oversaw the installation in the lobby. Then, Gene Kingman returned home to Omaha, the city he and Betty loved, where they raised their 2 daughters, Mixie and Elizabeth. Mixie graduated from Central High School and Elizabeth from Westside. Kingman spent 25 years in Omaha, and he became recognized as a leader both in this city and across the country, not only for his own artwork, but for his promotion of the arts and for his creativity in designing museum exhibits. While he was in Omaha for years, he was a regular exhibit consultant for the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. Eugene Kingman was beloved and charismatic, and before he left Omaha, Creighton University gave him an honorary doctorate. By the late 1980s, times had changed. The lobby of the New York Times needed remodeling, and the mural was carefully taken down. Knowing the value of this piece of art, but not knowing what to do with it, they put this mural in storage, where it remained. Until the Kingman daughters contacted the New York Times. Elizabeth Kingman was pretty dogged about tracking down the mural, sending email after email to people all over the New York Times. Finally, in what I would have said was sort of a really unproductive move, she wrote an email to Arthur O. Sulzberger, the publisher, who's he's the publisher of the New York Times now, and she had an answer back in 12 hours. The New York Times said it would be happy to donate the mural to Omaha, where it was created, and the Jocelyn Castle Trust agreed to become the owner. While many of the donors that Bruce mentioned were from Omaha, and many of them are sitting here today, two that stand out sent their own personal checks to help with the restoration: Arthur O. Sulzberger, the publisher of the New York Times, and Michael Golden, the vice chair. Both are sons of Arthur Hayes Sulzberger, who commissioned the mural. The past 2 years have been spent raising money, getting it restored, and finding the perfect location for the mural. And I hope we can agree this is the right place. I believe there is 1 inch of room on each side of this. There have been so many wonderful supporters of this project who have shared their personal memories and their stories about Kingman, and that has been a joy. Before Kenneth Bay speaks about the restoration, I would like to thank the steering committee, which has become known as the Women of the Mural. Julie Cobb, Lynn Wallen-Ziegenbein, and Julie Riley have worked for several years on this, and each one of them made significant contributions to making this a reality. Amy Trenalone from the Jocelyn Castle has been working on this since 2014 and joined the steering committee this spring, and I think we can all be grateful to them. And I would like to close with the words that Arthur Hayes Sulzberger loved and asked Kingman to make a prominent part of this mural. They're from a poem that is in your program. It's by Sarah Chauncey Woolsey, who went by the pen name Susan Coolidge. After the tragedy in Orlando this last Saturday, after countless shootings, stories of poverty and despair around the world, we can hear these inspirational words written in 1890 that still have the power to move us today. Every day is a fresh beginning. Every morn is the world made new. Thank you very much.
And now we have a treat. Kenneth Bay, who is the painting conservator at the Ford Conservation Center, is the individual who's responsible for bringing this back to life. And we'd like to have Kenneth come forward and say a few words about the process. Kenneth?
So before I go further, I should just acknowledge and thank some people who've helped me, because just my 2 hands alone couldn't do all this, and so I had to extend it into other hands. And so Erin Gary was instrumental as a volunteer. Please stand up. And she helped with the initial stages of stabilizing the mural and cleaning under my direction. Vonda Shaw, should also stand up, did a lot of the work in the late stages with what we call lining the mural and handling it as it had to come into the library and prepare it for the hanging. And then on one very important day when we had to mount the mural onto the stretcher, the wooden stretcher, Megan Griffiths, who also, these are all people associated with the Ford Conservation Center. And then, if any of you are interested, I have some brochures about the Ford Center, so I'm never one to pass an opportunity to keep promoting the work we're trying to do, to work for art collections and collectors around the region. This is actually, a very short period of time I've gotten to know this painting vertically. It's only been for maybe the last week or so, week and a half, that it's been vertical. It has been flat or rolled up all the time that I've known it, since 2 years ago, when I first saw it at the New York Times. And it was unrolled for me in an office room of the New York Times, and I could see how badly desiccated and stiffened from all the rolling and unrolling and the weakening from the stress of being in that configuration. It had been cracked and creased, and paint losses had already occurred, and more would continue to get developed on the painting as it was unrolled for transportation out to Omaha, and all the handling it received. So number one, it had to be stabilized. It had to be made flat again. It had to be made so that we could find a way to exhibit it again. And how to exhibit it meant that we wanted to make sure it could go in a configuration that wouldn't go back on a wall directly, but would be put on a canvas that could be put onto a stretcher, like a conventional canvas painting that we know, and would be movable, most importantly. As we've all heard, the library might have plans to renovate, or hopefully not move, but in any case, a new building might ensue. And that would be very important for the painting to be every bit part of that mural of the library redesign. The painting had to be made flat, and I had to use various techniques of using heat and pressure. We have a large table that can use heat up to about 160 degrees and use suction pressure under a very heat-resistant mylar that can bring down the picture in stages. And then finally, it had to be laminated onto this new canvas. And that's accomplished by using this, it's almost like a contact layer of adhesive, which is in a film, sort of a rolled film state. And it's, believe it or not, what's holding that picture onto the canvas is only 2 1/1000ths of an inch thick, heated up at a temperature and pressure, and it's been double checked. It actually comes also in 1 1/1000th of an inch. I thought just to be safe, I would use the 2 1/1000ths, so I could use double thickness to make sure this thing doesn't fall off the wall. The stretcher was manufactured in Ontario and is precision built and extremely strong, and has very, very heavy. I can attest to that too. The painting had to be, individual areas had to be brushed with consolidant, glue to stabilize those areas that were flaking, and then finally cleaned. And cleaning was just a very careful process of removing dirt and grime and bringing back colors that went from dark bluish green or brownish yellow to the colors that you see here, which gives all the richness and the contrast that you see. So I think it looks pretty good. Finally, there are little cutouts that are all the way up in the corners. The upper left and upper right sides, about maybe 1 foot down from the top corners, where it had to be cut away in the original configuration so it could fit into the wall moldings of the New York Times lobby. And when I saw how it was going into this space, I was almost worried that it would have to be cut out again just to accommodate these little wooden railings, but it just fit, as you see, by 1 inch. And finally, I'm going to point to Omaha in case you don't.
There's the Mississippi, Missouri, and that's the Platte River. Right there is Omaha.
So that's about all I have to say. Works of art, all works of art, go through a trajectory in their lifetime. They start off, they're made, they're created, they look one way, and then everything that happens to that work of art through its life has an impact on how it looks. And how it looks is an accumulation of everything that's happened, how it was built, what's happened to it, the accidents, the misfortunes. All those things impact cumulatively how that work of art looks. And it's very important to realize that how the work of art looks, whether it's dirty, changed in shape and dimension, or distorted, or else well preserved, all of that has an impact on the kind of meaning we can read into a work of art. So we should remember that the look of a work of art is also its meaning. And that's something to bear in mind when you come by and look at this mural. So thank you very much.
come up, Laura. We are so thrilled that the Omaha Public Library has agreed to allow this to be hung in there. And Laura is the director of the library, and we thought it would be nice to say thank you and to ask if you wanted to say a few words. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you all for being here this evening to see this amazing, beautiful painting. I learned about this in November, about 2 months after I started working here, when Julie and Maureen came and showed me this amazing PowerPoint presentation with a lot of Eugene Kingman's works. And I had never heard of him before. But when I found out he was a fellow transplanted Rhode Islander like myself, I felt a special affinity. And I want to thank the staff who spent a lot of time to set up this evening's event and just to get this whole ball rolling, because this has been several years in the making, as Maureen pointed out. So please join me in thanking them for all their work. And most importantly, I want to say how fitting this piece is for the library. And how I just feel very strongly that no matter where the main library ends up, this has to be a centerpiece in that library. And so wherever we go, if we move anywhere, that will definitely be coming with us and be featured prominently. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thanks, Maureen. That about wraps it up. I thank you again all for coming. It's a very exciting, whoops, what do we have to do? Oh, would you like to come up and say hello? Come on, ladies. Quinn, you can come too. Everybody, you know. We got one more.
Cousin Lou. Well, good. This is Lucius Kingman, our cousin, our first cousin, brother. Well, I had a little speech prepared, but everybody said everything I wanted to say. But I did want to say a couple of things that after contacting the New York Times and getting such a quick response, and the fact that the fellow remembered the mural and that they had no plans for it, I felt, well, it sits in limbo. This is kind of a pipe dream to, gee, would it ever be displayed again? And in a parallel universe, I mean, there it sat in limbo. But then over here, with the parallel universe, this lovely lady named Maureen wrote me a letter because she was trying to find out about the mural that Dad painted up our stairwell in the house Mitzi and I grew up in. And that she owns that house and wanted to know more about the mural. So that began conversations back and forth, and then she said, well, what else did your dad do? And so we got to talking, and it was a casual conversation one day about the mural. I mentioned it to her. Said, well, it was in limbo. They weren't planning on doing anything. She said, well, let's bring it to Omaha. Yeah, sure. That's a lovely, lovely thought. But yeah. So all I thought was that's going to take a lot of mojo. And it happens that Mojo is her nickname. So it must have been a sign. I was sure it was a sign. Because she and the women of the mural and the citizens of Omaha, wow, our family is so deeply appreciative and eternally grateful to everybody. I mean, I was born and raised here, and she went to Central High School. We have fond memories of Omaha, and as the family, we just want to say thank you to the city of wonderful people who have made this happen. I mean, we just dreamed it, but you made it happen. Thank you. That wraps it up, yes?
Okay, done. Bye.